Once upon a time, in the lively town of Willowbrook, there lived a young man named Jack. Jack was known throughout the town as a hard-working apprentice at the local blacksmith shop. Though he was skilled with his hands and had a kind heart, Jack often kept to himself, avoiding conflict whenever he could. One day, as Jack was on his way to deliver a freshly forged gate to a client, he noticed a commotion at the town square. A group of townspeople had gathered, whispering nervously as they watched a wealthy merchant, Mr. Trumbull, berate an elderly street vendor. The vendor, Mr. Harris, was well loved in Willowbrook, known for his fresh fruit and warm smile. But today, he was in tears, his fruit stand overturned, and his produce scattered on the cobblestones. "You've been selling on my spot," Mr. Trumbull shouted, his voice booming. "You've no right to be here, old man." Jack's heart sank. He knew Mr. Trumbull well enough to understand that the merchant was being unfair. There were no designated spots in the market, and everyone had the right to sell their goods wherever they found space. Yet, no one dared to challenge Mr. Trumbull, for he was influential and wealthy, and his wrath was not something the townspeople wanted to invite. Jack hesitated, his mind racing. He wanted to help Mr. Harris, but he was just a blacksmith's apprentice. What power did he have against a man like Mr. Trumbull? The crowd stayed silent, avoiding eye contact, and Jack felt the familiar urge to walk away, to keep his head down as he always did. But then Jack remembered something his mother used to say: "It's not enough to be good in your heart, you have to be good in your actions." Taking a deep breath, Jack stepped forward, his voice clear and steady. "Mr. Trumbull, this isn't right," he said. The crowd gasped, and Mr. Trumbull turned his glare towards Jack. "And who do you think you are?" Mr. Trumbull scoffed, his eyes narrowing. "You're just a boy, a nobody." Jack's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. "I'm someone who believes in fairness," he replied. "Mr. Harris has every right to be here, just like everyone else. You're not above the rest of us, and you shouldn't act like you are." For a moment, the square was silent, and Jack feared he might have gone too far. But then, one by one, the townspeople began to murmur in agreement. A shopkeeper stepped forward, followed by a farmer, and then another vendor. They all voiced their support for Mr. Harris, emboldened by Jack's stand. Even the mayor, who had been watching from his office window, came out to declare that no one in Willowbrook had exclusive rights to the market. Seeing the tide turn against him, Mr. Trumbull huffed in frustration and stomped away, leaving the market in peace. The townspeople cheered, and Mr. Harris, wiping his tears, thanked Jack with a shaky smile. "You've done more than just defend me today," he said. "You've reminded us all that we must stand together when things aren't right." Jack felt a swell of pride, not for himself, but for the town he loved. In that moment, he realized that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about choosing to act, even when you're afraid. From that day on, Jack was no longer just a quiet apprentice. He became known as the young man who stood up for what was right, inspiring others to do the same. And so, Willowbrook became a place where fairness and courage were cherished, all because one young man had the heart to take a stand.